Hello and welcome. I hope all of you are doing well. Thank you for joining me. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to World Affairs in Context on Substack and Patreon for extra content and join our community. I would love to see you there. The European Union is once again divided, and this time over how to use Russia's frozen assets to fund its proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. Well, this time, at the center of the storm sits Belgium, a small nation with an outsized role in this massive geopolitical chaos. In 2022, about 190 billion euros in Russian sovereign assets were immediately frozen, and most of that money, nearly all of it actually, sits in one place, in Euroclear. Euroclear is the Brussels-based financial clearinghouse that is essentially a backbone of Europe's financial system. At first, Western governments, including Belgium, Germany, and even the United States, agreed to freeze those assets but refused to touch them. The fear was very simple. Tapping into those resources could lead to endless legal challenges, a rightful and expected retaliation from Moscow, and damage to investor confidence in Europe's financial markets. Those were all quite reasonable backstops from breaking international law, you would agree. But now those fears are gone. The tone has shifted dramatically in the EU. As France and Germany descend into political chaos, Europe doesn't want to wait. It wants the money now. It wants free access to Russia's sovereign funds. Several European capitals, including Berlin, have started to rally behind the idea of turning the frozen assets into what's being called a reparations loan, a massive 140 billion euro fund to help arm Ukraine. In a recent article, Financial Times reports that the European Commission has even drafted a plan outlining how this could work. So they're trying very hard to make it appear legal so that they can get the buy-in from all European members. The idea is to avoid technically confiscating the assets. They don't like that word. It needs to be sugar-coated. Of course, confiscating assets could violate international law. And so instead, they want to create a loan that is backed by those assets. And if someday Russia pays war reparations, those funds could theoretically be reimbursed, according to the EU officials, although of course we understand that that's never going to happen. But the plan isn't risk-free either. Many EU leaders, including French President Macron, have admitted this, and they said there's just too much risk. This is not according to the law. And so that's exactly what Belgium now is worried about, and Belgium appears to be against the plan to move forward with confiscating or using that loan to fund Ukraine. Prime Minister Bart de Wever has made it very clear Belgium doesn't want to bear the financial or legal risks alone, so he's demanding that the other 26 EU member states share those risks and guarantee the loan in full. Otherwise, he warns, Belgium could end up on the hook if anything goes wrong, if the courts, for example, rule against the move, or if the assets eventually have to be returned to Russia. So you see, the absurdity of the situation is only worsening. It is worsening by the day. Belgium's demand hasn't gone down well in European capitals. Other EU diplomats have accused Belgium of hypocrisy, and they pointed out that Belgium was more than happy to claim Euroclear's profits as Belgian when it is time to collect taxes, but now that there is risk involved, it suddenly insists that Euroclear is European, not just Belgian. Since 2022, by the way, the Belgian government has already collected nearly 3.6 billion euros in taxes on the profits that are generated by those frozen Russian assets. Money that Brussels says is earmarked for Ukraine. But not all of that money has actually been transferred to Kiev. The divide within the EU is growing, and frankly, it seems that the EU is just dead set on a self-destructive path. Everybody sees it, everybody acknowledges it, but the EU remains completely oblivious to its own demise, economically, politically, and socially. Some EU officials have been very frustrated with Belgium this week because Belgium appears to kind of just stall the process of confiscating Russian foreign assets. One diplomat diplomat told the Financial Times. Belgium has spent 3 years saying Euroclear is Belgian and so are the benefits. Now, when it wants to share the risks, it claims Euroclear is European. Meanwhile, other countries, particularly Poland and Denmark, argue that they're already taken on significant risks and costs themselves, and so they refuse to back Belgium's initiative. Poland has, for example, hosted the main supply hub for NATO's weapons deliveries to Ukraine, and Denmark has sent F-16s fighter jets. So Denmark and Poland are sort of on the sidelines, and they do want the EU to pressure Belgium into moving forward with the plan. What's interesting is that the EU appears to now insist that the new plan to confiscate Russian sovereign assets is legally sound. So they went from saying outright, this is clearly illegal and we will not use the principle, we will just sort of use the interest, although that's illegal too. But now in 2025, they're saying this is actually legal and we will move forward. We just need consent from all EU members. One senior EU official said, "We think the risks here for Belgium are rather limited. That's not to say there's no risk at all, but they're probably manageable." This is the epitome of hypocrisy, as Zelensky's regime is kidnapping men of all ages across the country and sending them to the front lines against their will. As Ukrainian citizens want peace with Russia, Europe is bankrolling a military dictator who has turned an entire country, the biggest country in Europe in terms of territory, into effectively a concentration camp. Financial Times reports the EU is trying to reach a deal by December, with the first payments to Ukraine using Russian sovereign assets planned for 2026. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban recently offered a very blunt assessment of the EU's financial situation. Here's what he said, quote, "Given that we Europeans are going through a serious economic crisis, we need every penny that we can get. We've already spent 175 to 180 billion euros, and every year we'll have to spend another 40 to 50 to 60 billion euros. We simply don't have the money for Ukraine. This strategy has neither a rational basis nor a financial foundation." It appears that out of desperation, the EU may ultimately proceed with confiscating Russia's foreign reserves. It seems that we're getting one step closer to that, and it may not matter much how this is, of course, framed legally. The key fact remains that Moscow cannot freely access its own funds, and the West has no intention of returning the money. Russia, for its part, is unlikely to leave such actions unanswered. It has already drafted plans to seize Western assets if the EU moves forward with the confiscation plan. According to Bloomberg, hundreds of Western companies working in sectors from banking to consumer goods still operate in Russia, and Russia may nationalize and sell off foreign-owned assets under a new privatization mechanism. So there's a lot at stake, and it is likely fair to assume that the EU will not hesitate to escalate. That's the path we're on, so it remains to be seen how the situation unfolds within the next several weeks. I will keep you posted. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that you consider supporting my work. It means a lot. Become a subscriber on YouTube, Substack, and Patreon. I would love to see you on my alternative social media platforms. You will find them linked in the description below. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Take care.